Welcome, fellow enthusiasts of the unexplained, to Sasquatch Watch Radio. If you're as fascinated by the elusive, legendary creature known as Bigfoot, you found your new home here on Sasquatch Watch Radio. We're diving deep into everything Bigfoot. From thrilling eyewitness accounts and compelling scientific theories to the latest research, expeditions, and even a little bit of the folklore that surrounds this enigmatic being, we'll explore it all. Whether you're a seasoned squatcher or just curious about the giant hairy dude in the woods, you're in the right place. Get ready to have your perceptions challenged, your curiosity piqued, and maybe, just maybe, you'll start looking at the shadows in the forest a little differently. So settle in, turn up your speakers, and let's journey together into the heart of the Sasquatch mystery. This is Sasquatch Watch Radio, and the hunt for truth begins now. Here's your host, Gary Kendrick.
Hey everybody, today is Monday, September the 29th, 2025. We're going to have a great show tonight. I have a really exciting guest on tonight. We have Lyle Blackburn coming on tonight. Without further ado, I'll bring Lyle on.
Hey there. After that awesome intro, I feel like I'm in for like this, enormous great event.
I hope so. That's kind of my goal.
That's the goal, man. That's a good.
Trying to have a good job. Well, I know you're fairly well rounded, you're out there, you're fairly famous. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop in and say this is Lyle Blackburn. Lyle is an author, a podcaster, a cryptid researcher, a musician, a TV personality. I don't know how the man has time to do anything. He is busy, and he's also a Texan. So we all know the stories are bigger in Texas. So
that's right.
Let's hop right into it. Wow, what got you into cryptids, especially Sasquatch?
Well, the short version of that is ever since I could remember, I loved anything spooky or monsters. I loved monster movies when I was a little, just a little kid. And when I was in third grade, I got a book called Strange But True by Daniel Cohen, and that had chapters on all sorts of mysterious things that all of us would be familiar with, but it had chapters on Bigfoot, Yeti, and Loch Ness Monster. And that was the first I had heard of, sightings of, quote unquote monsters in real life. And that just blew my mind. And so being from Texas, all that seemed very far away, Scotland and the Pacific Northwest, the Himalayas. So I wasn't too worried that I'd run into these creatures in the woods or in the lakes because I grew up hunting with my father. He was an avid bow hunter. So as early as I can remember, I'm in the woods. So I was familiar with those environments. And then sometime when I was a kid, I saw the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek in a drive-in theater. And not only did I love the movie, it was sort of this, cross between a horror movie and a documentary, but it was about a Sasquatch-like creature said to live in southern Arkansas, which was in this little town only about 3 hours from where I grew up in Fort Worth, Dallas. So at that point, I was all in, and, that kind of had that southern feel to it. And ever since then, I loved that movie, and I just was fascinated with all cryptids, but of course, Bigfoot was a big one.
And speaking of Boggy Creek, that was like one of my first experiences with Bigfoot. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, which, that's pretty common with a lot of us. And, Boggy Creek played a lot into it. Man, when that booger run his hand through that window to grab that dude, I was done. That scared me to death. Oh, my gosh. And, in search of and a lot of things like that, too. And I always had a a belief that it was real. And then in 2006, I had a sighting. So I'm no longer a believer. I know. I know. While we're talking about it, let's tell us a little bit about the book that you put out. And I believe it's been several years ago. The Legend or the Beast of Boggy Creek.
Yeah, that was my first book, and that came out in 2012. So I'd been working on that for 2 or 3 years prior to that, and that's when I really sort of started looking into this as an adult, probably around, well, I mean, I was reading books and kind of sort of keeping up, but around 2008 or nine, I was kind of tuning back in. I was, what's going on with Bigfoot research? And I was trying to get up to speed, and I wanted to write a book. It was just something I wanted to do. And being that I love the legend of Boggy Creek, it was based on alleged true sightings. I just jumped in and I thought, man, I'm going to write a book on this. Nobody ever has. I mean, it's one of the most famous Bigfoot films. It's influential, the making of the movie and sightings of the creature. So I started going up to Falk and interviewing people, going in the woods, trying to find all the old sites where all this happened, scenes in the movie. And I just immersed myself in that. And I really wrote the book. I didn't expect anything. I just wanted to do it kind of for my own, knowledge. But I got a publishing deal pretty quickly. And then right after that, a lot of the shows were coming out. I mean, Monster Quest was already on and they had done something, but Finding Bigfoot and Monsters and Mysteries in America called me. And so I was on those shows. So I thought, and being asked to speak at conferences, and I didn't really realize how many people like us love the movie. And I've had literally thousands of people come up and say the same exact thing. That scene, and when he puts his hand through the window.
Yeah.
So it was just that thing. And so once I realized that, wow, I'm not just the only one that's all crazy about this. I thought, man, this is good stuff. So I just continued to research and write more books and continue to document things in Falk. That's always kind of my ground zero. But yeah, I just kept doing it.
While researching in Falk, did you ever have any encounters or any sightings yourself?
There's been a number of things that have happened over the years, and I have had, I would say, there's 2 sightings. One of them, I'm not 100% sure. It was a little far away, and I couldn't say positively, but it was, believe it or not, it was in 2024. I finally had a sighting that, I believe was the creature. It's what everybody else has reported. So, it took a while, and I've spent, I don't know how many hours and how many nights and days traipsing through the Sulphur River bottoms. But yeah, I was lucky enough to have just at least one brief sighting.
Tell us about it a little bit if you don't care.
So to what we were trying to accomplish that day, I had gone up there in early April of 2024 and done some research, and it was kind of active. I found what was a kind of a promising track, and I heard some knocks and things out while we were camping. And I was hiking back along this swampy lake that is close to the Sulphur River. All of this is like bottomland hardwood habitat. It's very swampy. There's a river basin. There's Mercer Bayou, which is a swamp. So it's everything, if anybody's seen The Legend of Boggy Creek, of course. And I was hiking along this lake, and I found like 4 juvenile hog skulls kind of piled up. And I thought, I think somebody's put them here, but it was kind of spooky. So I took a picture, I put it online, and a buddy of mine said, we were there about 5 months before that, and we found a whole bone yard of what looked like hog and deer thrown in it. And I thought, well, that's interesting because people do shoot hogs. There's a lot down there and they'll throw them, but people don't usually shoot deer and discard the body. So I thought, well, went up there a couple of weeks later, and hiked back along like that lake where he said he had seen this bone pile. We go, and it's myself and my fellow researcher Glenn Haskins and my girlfriend April, and we hiked late afternoon into the evening back along all the way around this lake going towards the river, and we don't see the bones. So after a while, we're just there's kind of a creek that flanks that. So anytime I'm in there, I'm looking in that mud, looking for tracks, just observing. Well, we it was getting later towards the evening. It was about, we needed to turn around, but I saw this game trail, which kind of went up a little slope. And I thought, I'm just going to walk up it. I'd been walking through this muddy muck, the whole time down on the edge of this lake. So it was just like a nice clear path. And for whatever reason, I walked up it. They were about 20 yards behind me. Well, I'm walking up that, and I always try to move quietly. I'm not loud in the woods. I kind of blend in. And all of a sudden I hear to my right kind of a crunching, like maybe a footstep or something, or some animal moving in the leaves. There was a lot of leaf litter down in there. I turn and I see first something come out of the undergrowth, like something dark, and it was kind of low. And I first thought it might be a big hog over there coming out of that brush. Well, within a second, I see that was a leg. And then I see the full figure walk between sort of an open space between that brush and some heavier trees. And for 3 to 4 seconds, I see it just walk upright, bipedal. It was uniformly dark in color, just almost black. And then it sort of went out of sight. And, in those few moments, your adrenaline pumps up. You're like, you go from it's a hog, it's something walking, and it's a person. No, it's not a person. It's the creature. And so then I had two choices. Was what I would normally do is sort of run right after it so I could see it more, or alert my cohorts here, because I thought, well, if they see it, and that sort of corroborates what I see. So I made choice number 2. I didn't go right after it. It had gone out of sight and I couldn't hear it anymore. I don't know if it saw us. They were kind of talking once it was going in their direction. So I kind of went down about 20 yards and tried to tell them as quietly as I could that I'd seen something. And at that point, when they realized I was serious, we sort of just all 3 grid search style went down this slope and down where I had seen it go. And we start spreading out and looking, and we don't see it. We kind of walked in the direction I thought it did, but we didn't find it. So all I can presume is that in the time it took me to go tell them, that it probably became aware of our presence, if it wasn't already, and took off in some direction unknown. So we kind of just spent about 30 minutes back there looking around, and I couldn't see any tracks. There was a lot of leaves there right in the area where I saw it walking, but and that was it. And then we headed back. But as a footnote to that, my buddy Glenn was camping in a campsite that was that's where we had originated from in hiking. Later that night, he and another friend of ours saw an upright, dark figure run on 2 legs across. There's no light out there, but it was fairly moonlit, and they could see this thing run across very briefly. And this was kind of a stone's throw from where this all took place, where I had a sighting. So I'm not sure if, he wasn't completely sure that he had seen something, but it did seem coincidental. So that was it. And that was my 4 seconds of glory.
How far do you think you were away from it?
I wasn't very far from it. I would say about 30 yards. So it was really close. And other than it was kind of obscured, it wasn't the heaviest of trees, but it was enough to where if something walks back there, you see it, you don't, you see it, you don't. And it was so quick. And of course, it's when you least expect it. So, and I did turn and I observed it the whole time, but it was a short period, but it was close enough for me to rule out, pretty much everything.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Exactly. I had the same kind of instinct. All I could do was watch it to start with. And then I thought to myself, okay, that's somebody. And then you got to rule out somebody because there's nobody that big. And then you run through the things. Well, maybe it was a bear. No, this thing had shoulders. So, yeah, you run through the gamut, and I completely understand what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. It's your mind, when your natural scheme in your mind thinks human when you see something walking on two legs, but it was uniformly black. I couldn't see clothes. And of course, there's really nobody in the woods dressed in all black, but maybe me, especially in that area. People don't wear black clothes. It's just not, but it was definitely, I would say, I kind of tried to estimate the height, and I would say definitely much taller than a person, maybe 7 feet. It was brief, so I couldn't say down to the inch, but it was definitely bigger than a person, probably 7 feet.
Yeah. David wants to know, was there any smell at that range?
I didn't smell anything. You would presume that, if it had an odor, I would have smelled it, but we didn't notice any odors. Neither did the other guys.
Excellent. Well, I've got to ask, you've done a lot of research on Falk and, the legend of Boggy Creek and things like that. In the making of the movie, and it is 100% an iconic movie. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's cheesy and all that other stuff, but the amount of people that name that as, one of the premier Bigfoot things out there. But how many actual occurrences were used in the movie, do you think?
What you see in the movie is everything in there was based on actual reports, and the director, Charles Pierce, he was meticulous about trying to recreate them in the most accurate way possible, sometimes literally using the same house, the same people, the same location. I can't think offhand how many encounters are in there. It's probably, there's really only about 20 or something that are represented in the movie, and those date from about 1955 to 1971. There's only one scene in there that we've never been able to figure out. No one up there. There is some guy on this Apache ranch. Nobody knows what that is. So that may have been one that either only Charles Pierce knew about or he added in there. But all the other ones, from the early sightings by the Crabtrees, all those ones by Willie Smith, the Searcy family, incidents with Howard Walraven, the whole thing with the Fords, that was all the real deal. And he does it. The filmmaking is great because he really hypes up the intensity and the drama, I guess. But that's the way it is in real life. Those people were seeing something that they were unsure what that was, and it was scary. So it's pretty real life.
That's awesome. It's real awesome. Well, my next question is, as a native Texan, tell us about the Texas Sasquatch. Is it different than other Sasquatch?
Well, I find, pardon me, I find that the descriptions are pretty much, they match anywhere else. These sort of the differences in height or hair color or this or that is kind of consistent, I think, with at least other southern Sasquatch. So Texas is a place where most people would not imagine that there is Bigfoot sightings. And a lot of people's impression of Texas is sort of this cowboy landscape, like ranches and wide open plains and all that stuff. And we do have that. kind of in the central area. And then, of course, to the west, it does get very arid trans-Pecos geology. But the third of the state is known as the Piney Woods, and the eastern third is where most of the sightings are, the majority. And it gets swampy over to the east. I mean, our neighbor is Louisiana, the Bayou State, so it starts getting swampy. There's a heavy pine forestry out there, high annual rainfall, lots of creeks, waterways, ponds, rivers, all those ingredients that you'll find that are consistent with most Bigfoot sightings or habitats. And so in that area, there is just a long history of really solid sightings, and dating back to at least the 1800s, and of course, progressing up through the 1900s until newspapers were covering it. So, yeah, it's interesting. And there are a few sightings out in the West in those cowboy landscapes where you think you would never see a Bigfoot, but there are a few sightings out there. And in fact, those are kind of the weirder, almost the more interesting ones, because they're just so strange. But my book, Texas Bigfoot, I cover kind of the whole history of it, but I couldn't even fit all the sightings in there that there are.
I know I've heard a lot of people talk about the piney forest, and then some people call it the piney thicket and things like that. And they say once it gets dark, it sounds like something from Jurassic Park.
Right. We have a place called the Big Thicket, which just the name right there. And, it has a good history of sightings. I've interviewed some people that have had sightings in the area. I've heard some really good vocalizations. And yeah, it's a kind of swampy, rugged habitat that has, of course, like anything, it's been eroded by development over the years, but it's got a good portion of it that's held out and is still very, very wild.
Yeah. Just had a question here. Mick says he's read a lot of reports of Sasquatch encounters, including from Texas, and it seems like they're more aggressive Sasquatch are from Texas in the Big Thicket area.
Well, I mean, there's definitely the southern Sasquatch has more aggressive encounters. I mean, but I did in my book Beyond Boggy Creek, where I covered the whole Deep South, you would find aggressive encounters from Oklahoma, and there's some from Louisiana and other states, but and from Texas as well. And of course, the legend of Boggy Creek kind of made famous some of those. So the Big Thicket area, the Sam Houston National Forest, which is close to the Big Thicket, has some sightings that people say are have been aggressive. Some stories out of there. So yeah, definitely we got those in Texas, and generally those aggression stories all over the South.
Yeah. I kind of think it's where Bigfoot has to live outside, and it is humid in the South. And humidity plays a big factor.
Right. I mean, I just think, man, if I was covered in hair and I'm, out there in some of these environments where it's rough living. So yeah, I'd be a little bit, pissed off if I saw some humans in my area.
Oh yeah. Heck yeah. I got one more right here real quick before we get, into the middle of the show here. You've written a book, Boggy Creek, In Search of the Southern Sasquatch. And, I kind of led into this a little bit, but, a lot of people talk about different Sasquatch species and things like that. Do you think that the Southern Sasquatch is different than the Northern Sasquatch in like aggression, feeding habits, and things like that?
I think yes, in a way. I mean, just even simply from an environmental standpoint, the terrain. I mean, some of the reports down here, especially if you get over into Florida with the skunk apes, there's reports of these things. They seem a little bit more ape-like, if you will. There's some stories about them running on all fours. I've run across several of those, which was indicative of more ape-like behavior, I guess. And just generally that with the going back to the aggressive behavior, definitely more of that in the South. And as far as being a different species, I mean, I think that in some ways they're described similarly, but you have something called Bergman's Law, which would apply to something like a bear. When you're up in the north, the environment's different. It's mountainous, it's colder. The food sources could vary, and those tend to be bigger. I mean, bears there will be much bigger than, say, a black bear who you might find in East Texas. So, there can be a definite difference. Now, whether they're different species, I mean, I'm sure there could be various branches that are different. I mean, I can't imagine there'd be just a whole lot of them. I mean, we're doing hard enough to find one.
Yeah.
So I don't imagine, just sort of gut feeling, that there's numerous, but I think they definitely adapt to those environments and would over time, just like a bear, and would have the food source, if you're in a swamp, versus the Olympic forest or something at two different places. So they would have to adapt.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in that too. Where you talk about Bergman's Law, there's a species of white-tailed deer that's in the Keys of Florida that's called the Keys deer, and they're not much bigger than a large dog. They're really small, but they're still a white-tailed deer. It's just a subspecies.
Right. I think that is a good example, and that's probably what we're seeing here.
And something too, I just worked this weekend at the Norton, Virginia Bigfoot Festival. And that was a big question I got asked a lot, was about aggression. And one of my thoughts on aggression is even rock throwing is a passive aggressive act. Okay. If I get into a situation where there's rock throwing, I tend to back out of that. And the reason I try to back out of that is I think the aggression level is only going to escalate from the points to where he's whizzing rocks by you.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely, we can presume that that's a warning of some sort right there. So, I mean, you don't want to cross an angry creature. So, I mean, backing off if there's aggression, those warning signals are probably good to pay attention to, for sure.
Yeah, and if it can whiz a rock, bigger than your fist, a couple of, 20, 30 yards at you, that is some serious power, Jack.
Right. And I think the scary thing is they're quite accurate, because very rarely do you ever get a report where somebody just if you got hit in the head with one of those rocks, it would practically kill somebody. But you don't get a lot of that. They throw those rocks and they're good aim. So, I mean, that being said, if they really wanted to advance or to provoke, I mean, I would say they could probably take you out with a rock pretty good.
The only that I know of that I've ever heard, I'll say this, that I've ever heard of someone being hit by a rock was actually it was a story from Vietnam, and they called them rock apes. And this guy was the point man in his platoon, and he was out in front of the rest of the platoon, and there was a rock that went by him, and he just continued to move. And the next one hit him in the back, and it hit him in the back so hard that it knocked him down. And he thought it was somebody behind him that, was doing it. And he turned around and looked, and there was the rock ape standing there throwing rocks at him. That's the only one that I know of that's being hit. I'm sure there's probably a lot more, but that's the only one that I know of.
Right. Yeah. Those ones from the rock ape stories. But I can't think of any offhand that has been in North America where somebody said they got hit. But of course, numerous incidents where they were throwing them, various size rocks. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, Lyle, we've got a treat for you. We've got you a song created, so it's halfway point in the show, so I'm going to go ahead and get that going. So hang on.
A story starts to grow. A man who walks a road where shadows go. He felt the pull of the macabre and strange, and spent a lifetime on the open range. A pen in hand, a book to write. He brought the mysteries into the light. From Boggy Creek to the Texas pines, he walked the legend's sacred line. He's the author, the rocker, the man on the trail, with a black cowboy hat for a hopeful trail. He walks the line of the real and the myth, with a gripping tale and a rock and roll riff. From Ghoultown stages to a monster show, Lyle Blackburn, he's a modern hero. His music's played for a worldwide crowd. The drums are beating and the amps are loud. From Solitude Aeturnus, a path he's led, to 9 great albums in our very head. His tunes are rocking in movies and games. He's called by many different names. A guest on Coast to Coast AM, so clear. He brings his music and his honest fear. He's the author, the rocker, the man on the trail, with a black cowboy hat for a hopeful trail. He walks the line of the real and the myth, with a gripping tale and a rock and roll riff. From Ghoultown stages to a monster show, Lyle Blackburn, he's a modern hero. He's a renaissance man, it's plain to see. From cryptid conferences to eternity, he's got a passion that is hard to match. A human journey, a world to catch. He's walked the line, he's told the tale. With a black cowboy hat, he will never fail.
All right, that was good.
That's awesome, and it covered all the details. I feel so honored for
That was awesome.
I'm gonna have to play that as my intro now to every conference I speak at.
It's a good one, dude. That had that definitely had that Bayou Rock sound to it. I like that.
It was
That
awesome.
was all right. Lyle, I know you have a busy schedule. Do you still have time to get out in the field and actually do kind of boots on the ground research?
I still do. I make that a point. And that's kind of, people ask me like, what do you do for a hobby or whatever? I'm like, my whole life is like hobbies turned to I don't know, a career. But I love to get out in the woods, and I was just out in Falk for a 3-day thing last weekend or weekend before last, spending time out there. And I always love to get in the woods and do research or just be outdoors. That's kind of what keeps me going, because if I just only did everything else, it's a lot of I'm fine in cities and been in rock bands, but really I'm an outdoors guy at heart. So I just make it a point to get out there, and it gets more challenging because I have all this stuff to do, but that's all I do. So plenty of time.
Yeah. Where do you think the best place in Texas is for Sasquatch research?
Well, I think I mean, the Big Thicket is a good place. All that kind of the piney woods area. The more you go kind of in the southeast, the Sam Houston National Forest is good. The Big Thicket area, over to the Sabine River, which is kind of, it starts in North Texas, but it becomes the wide river that's the border between Texas and Louisiana. A lot of sightings along that river down there. And then if you go more in the northeast, there's Caddo Lake, and it's been pretty good consistently, especially in decades past. That had some really good sightings. I've known some people that had sightings out there. So just pretty much in the eastern portion, you can pick one of those wooded areas, and you're going to be in a spot that has a history of sightings for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Texas does. I mean, Texas is a huge place to start with. Okay. When I lived in California, I moved from California back to Virginia, my hometown, and it takes like 12 hours to drive across the Panhandle. It seems like it is a huge state.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of ground right there to cover.
Right. I mean, and that's why people misunderestimate Texas. It's like, yeah, we do have unlikely habitat areas, but even if you just confine that to the eastern third, there's still a massive amount of forestry. I mean, we're only second to Alaska in square miles of forestry, but it's all crammed mostly in the eastern half. And I think over the years, I've learned a lot about sightings in Louisiana. I think if just between those two, and then, you just go straight up north from the very eastern border of Texas, well, you're up in Fouke. So there's really kind of it's a little bit non-contiguous forestry, a little bit broken up, but I mean, if you travel in the creeks, it's all really one big thing. And you have, everything from Boggy Creek on south, whether you're in Texas or Louisiana, I think it's just a perfect spot.
Yeah, and that's a classic line from the movie too. It always follows the creeks.
Yeah, and it's proven to be true. It's kind of mind-boggling to think, because that movie was really the template for a lot of both the television shows and for Bigfoot research itself, because there's so many of these sightings that you can chart down creeks and down rivers and waterways where they would naturally travel, and was just words of wisdom, as well as just the reenactments and all that. It's like all these shows nowadays that they show these reenactments. Well, hey, Charles Pierce was doing that back in 1972 with this movie. Yeah. So it was that
was like the very first docudrama type, or what they call it now, faux documentary, docudrama, something like that.
Yeah,
that's
something
the very first one.
Yeah, and just the way it was done, and using authentic people, and not, it wasn't a Hollywood production. This was an independent film. It made it so real. And I remember when I was a kid watching it in the drive-in, in my kid brain, I was thinking, how was the news person there filming when the person saw it? Because I didn't understand what a recreation was. I was that young, but it was like, oh my God, they're there and they're having this sighting. I mean, it was so real. And I think that was why it was so effective. I mean, yeah, now by today's standards, it can be cheesy or it's slow. There's some songs and so forth. But man, it was scaring people to death they were running out of the theaters screaming back in the day.
Oh, yeah. And I caught it in the late 70s, I guess. Late 70s, maybe early 80s. I was still young. And we seen it on TV.
Yeah.
And like I said, boy, that thing had me tore up now. What do you think about the three-toed footprints?
That's always kind of a conundrum, really, for me, because first, not all the tracks that have been found down there have been three-toed prints. The movie kind of played that up, but after the movie, I mean, there's been four-toed tracks found and even five-toed tracks. The three-toed tracks, of course, presuming those are real tracks. And I mean, I've talked to people in Falk who were there, who saw them in the bean field. You know, I was friends with Smokey Crabtree, and he took casts of them. And you know, there's differences of opinion, but some people definitely think. I mean, this was not a hoax, and there was no way to make these, and they looked real, and they went for, you know, it wasn't just a couple of tracks. It went all the way across this bean field, and I've been on that bean field. So if we presume they were real tracks, you know, you just have to say, well, why would there be 3 toes? And, you know, there's various explanations. It could be a deformity. You would assume if they're a breeding type of population, that deformities, you know, will happen in digits and fingers and toes. And so that could be something. I mean, of course, it's if you walked around down in the Sulphur River bottoms with no shoes on, I'd lose a few toes. It would be long. I can't imagine, but the footprint itself and the photos I've seen of it don't look like it's an injured foot. To me, if anything, it looks like a deformity, and it could have been that individual. And I mean, I know there's got to be more than one of these. It wasn't just one creature, even though in the movie kind of made it a lonely creature for the effect of the film. But there were different sizes being seen. There was different colorations. And so it could have been that individual that had the 3-toed tracks. But it ultimately, it doesn't mean that all southern Sasquatch have 3 toes. It's just simply an individual in that case, and there's, you know, all manners of toes in between.
Wow, that's pretty cool. This is a weird question, but you know, I try to ask all of the guests when they come on this question, and I'll explain it as I go along. It's kind of my trademark question: animal, mineral, or vegetable? Animal, do you think that Bigfoot is a living, breathing, flesh and blood animal? Mineral, do you believe that Bigfoot might be extraterrestrial or interdimensional? Or vegetable, do you think it's more of a spiritual animal? Or do you think it's a combination of all 3 or any of them? Or
Well, it's a hard question because obviously no one can truly say. I mean, when I first thought of this, and like most, it was just simply an undiscovered species of ape or hominid that was flesh and blood, and very much of that. And I still kind of go with that. It's sort of, in my mind, the romantic view of Sasquatch. I mean, we are discoverers, explorers, Indiana Jones. You know, we can find that creature out there, and we could conceivably touch it. You know, as far as extraterrestrial, I think that is the lowest on my list of possibilities. It just, the creatures and the description and how human-like in some ways, it just seems, there seems so much of our terrestrial Earth. The wild man sightings, it just seems more far-fetched that they're landing on UFOs. And I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, and no one has said, I saw a UFO and then I saw the Falk monster or whatever. So are they spirit animals and other things? I mean, we don't have proof. So, I mean, I try to keep an open mind and not just dismiss other people's views of it, because we're all speculating. So I have some open-mindedness that it's something that we don't quite understand, and that's why we haven't been able to prove it, even though people see it. But it does leave tracks, and it seems to be that would have to be physical to leave tracks. I think in the terms of whether it's a spirit animal or spiritual in some way, I think oftentimes we underestimate nature itself, and certainly a creature who would conceivably be more intelligent, more elusive. I mean, the way things are designed, the hair color, the way they move, everything they do is designed to be to their advantage in the woods. And one minute you see them, the next minute you don't. Well, I know some Marines that can do that. in the woods. I did some Marine training, and those guys could disappear. And you're like, how did you do that? Well, we're trained. So I think it would be very easy for these to seem very spiritual in a way when it's just nature. I mean, and there's things like infrasound, and look at octopus, the way they can blend, and chameleons that change color. I mean, these seem like magical creatures, but this is biological. So I think that they could do these things and remain elusive and still be physical. But, if we're 100 years down the road and we still can't find one, maybe they are jumping through portals.
Just for the record, I'm an old Marine myself, and yeah, I have seen Marines that can be there 1 second and gone the next.
That's right. So, yeah.
Lyle, do you think that other cryptids, like maybe the Beast of Bray Road or the Dog Man and some of these other ones, might be a misidentified Sasquatch?
Possibly, though a dog man enthusiast would tell you that the Bigfoot is a misidentified dog man. I was on a show the other day, and they're trying to suggest that the Fouke monster was a dog man. Like, well, there's one thing I know for sure, and that is not a dog man. But yeah, I think that you're seeing if something is up on two legs, it's dark and hairy, and it's not the best lighting conditions, and it's in the woods. It could go either way. I mean, you're going to interpret that as whatever you want to presume it is, a dog man or a Bigfoot. The thing with dog man is that, when I first started serious Sasquatch research, no one told you about a dog man sighting. There was Bray Road, and then there was maybe a few other weird this and that's, but you didn't have this high volume of everybody is reporting dog men. So I think it's cultural. When we have something on our mind, like when we know what a Bigfoot is, we will interpret something as a Bigfoot. If we know what dog man is, we tend to interpret. So there's a gray area there, as doesn't mean these creatures aren't out there. I've interviewed some pretty good witnesses that have had dog man sightings that I just simply can't explain. So I know there's something to that. And it's probably not as simple as all of them being misidentified. I think there's two different cryptids. But when you got 3 or 4 seconds to see some scary thing out there in the woods, it's maybe hard to tell.
And, that's something that I tell people too is, I don't take anything away from anybody's interpretation. That's what they believe that they saw. Mm-hmm. Now, I wasn't there to see it, so I can't interpret what happened. So I have to kind of lean on what they have to say. So I take everybody at face value, and then I try to break it down, okay, they said it phased out. Well, maybe it is so well camouflaged. A deer can phase out on you. Okay. I mean, I deer hunt off and on and things like that. And I guess you can kind of relate to this being in Texas. We hog hunt, my son and my father-in-law, up in West Virginia. And boy, they're there 1 minute and gone.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely gone. So I think a lot of it, like you said, is environmental. I think they're so well adapted to their environment. What would be your best advice for a new researcher?
Well, I think just, a few pointers would be good. First, finding a place where, you're more likely to have a sighting. So, and it's not hard with the internet to sort of scope out areas that have a lot of sightings. You can also, there's numerous authors that have written books that are specific to various states. Seek out a Bigfoot book that's been written about your state. And that'll kind of clue you in as to where the best area would be to go, to up your chances. And then, of course, if you're new to this sort of, I grew up hunting, so I already was, familiar with the woods and the dangers thereof. But if you're going to go out and start going in the woods and that's not something you've done before, you definitely need to go with other people, be prepared, have a survival supplies and whatever, depending on where you're going, know where you're going. Be careful of private property. You know, you never know where you're stepping these days. You'll find something that's worse than Sasquatch.
Yeah.
You know, so just kind of be prepared and find a place that that has a high concentration of the best sightings you can find, and most of all, just have fun with it. You know, you don't necessarily go out one weekend and just, you know, have a sighting. It may take 2 weekends or it may take 20 years, but always just have fun because you're out there in nature and you can never go wrong with getting out there, you know, in nature.
Yeah, I firmly agree. I firmly agree. What do you think is the best research tool that you use?
Well, you know, I would say a camera is key, but even I saw one and had a phone camera in my pocket and could not pull it out fast enough and take a picture, even if I thought about it. So, you know, I think there's just a few things like that would be the best things to have. You know, a camera, obviously, some audio recording equipment, some casting material. And, you know, you're going to find that track when you least expect it. So having some hydrocal and some water, just having a way to cast that would be definitely good. And then if you can afford it, some kind of thermal imaging device, so you could have an advantage of seeing in the dark. That would be good. And of course, technology is based on what you can afford. I mean, I think a great thing and a great tool we have now would be drones. You know, those are things that could be used. Thermal imaging drones. I mean, it's all this stuff is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and things that, you know, that you didn't have. Though Roger Patterson, all he needed was a horse and an actual film camera. So
Well, wind up film camera.
that's right. You just actually never know. I mean, you'd have all the best equipment. I know some guys that have trucks that are just tricked out with all the greatest equipment, and then some lady driving down some county road sees a Bigfoot. So you never really know. But yeah, just carry those things because it's better to have them than not.
Oh yeah, 100% agree. Well, Lyle, let's talk a little bit about Ghoultown. I believe that's your band.
Right. So yeah, I've been a musician pretty much since high school, and that's how I've made a living between writing and music all my life. I have only had a few other kinds of jobs, and Ghoultown is a band I started way back in 1999, and I'd been on bands prior to that that were on record labels and things like that, but that was at a time when I just decided to do my own label and do my own thing. And the band it's a unique band. People ask us, what genre is it? It's like, I don't really know. I don't have a genre. It's sort of a crossroads somewhere between Johnny Cash and Rob Zombie, this sort of dark Western vibe, sort of Tex-Mex rock and roll. I don't know. But it's been a successful thing. We've done many tours. We've toured in Europe and US and Canada, and done videos with celebrities like Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, and produced many albums, and those are well received, and our videos are quite popular. So yeah, it's been good. And that's kind of, I don't know if you call that my day job or my night job, but we're working on a new album that we're trying to get recorded here probably around the first of next year. So I'm trying to work that in, but it's a challenge.
Oh, I guarantee it. I guarantee it. This is another hard question. If given the choice, do you prefer field work or book work?
I mean, I like them both. I mean, fortunately for me, I like the process of writing. It's just something I like. But when I used to, it's funny because when I used to envision wanting to write books, I thought, it's so boring. It just sounds boring. I want to do that, but it sounds boring. And that's, you know, I could write a song and I could perform it the next week. I'm thinking with books, it sounded so laborious. That was until I discovered that I wanted to write cryptid books, because it is the best of both worlds because I can go out and I can do research, whether that's go to locations and interview people or go into the field. Like if I'm researching in some area or trying to write a book about Texas Bigfoot or whatever, I go into the field, and all those things play into that story because I'm giving that perspective of being out there. Not to mention if I had a sighting, of course, that's obviously a good thing for a book, but so I kind of like them equally, and they balance each other out. I've got the time when I can compile the information and write and share these stories, and especially like with Boggy Creek, is preserve the history of it and gather more encounters. I mean, there's so many more sightings that have occurred over the years that weren't in the movie, and pretty much without me gathering those and documenting them, they would be lost. But yeah, so I think it balances. If I work too much in the office, I wouldn't be happy. And, I'm not a guy that just going to live off the grid. Maybe one of these days I will, but for now I don't. So it all balances. So I love it equally.
Yeah. Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Well, we got a couple guest questions here I'm going to try to get to. This one's from Mick up in Canada. What's Lyle's favorite Sasquatch encounter? Whether it's his own experience or something that he's read about.
Oh man. There's a couple of them. There was one by my late friend, Mike Woolley, which was kind of a scary encounter he had near his Wally, Louisiana back in the 80s. And he was in a tree stand, and he was sitting up there, and this fawn, like a small deer, ran up and sat down below his stand, which he thought was kind of strange. And then he heard some noise, and all of a sudden this bipedal hair-covered figure comes out of the woods, and he's literally looking right at it. And it's a scary, hairy looking thing, and it ends up looking at him. And after a while, he ends up just getting out of the tree stand and making a run for his truck. And these things came after him. And he's told this on a few podcasts. He's since passed away, but I always just knowing the guy and hearing his story. And it was just one of those aggressive ones that was pretty scary. And just having sat in a deer stand myself up in a tree, I pictured myself in that same situation. I'm like, man, that is scary business. This was way back in the 80s. This was a time when, there wasn't so much everybody knew about Bigfoot. You saw something like that in Louisiana, you're just thinking, what the heck is that? That's one of my favorites, I think. But I can just rattle off a number of these. I did a podcast episode on one where these two sisters had a sighting near Cedar Key, Florida. Very clear daylight sighting by two witnesses. They were both there, and I interviewed both of them, and researched that sighting. That was a really hair-raising one as well. But yeah, so many good ones.
It's always good when you can have like two different witnesses. I think like one of the most compelling local stories was there was a local guy that was walking actually not too far from where I'm camping at right now. And there was one that ran off the hill and in front of a car. And he said there was two girls in the car, and it ran by him and into the river and across the river. And he told me that encounter. And then I actually worked with one of the ladies that was in the car. I worked with her husband, and she told me the story. And she said, yeah, it ran right by, and she named the guy. She said it ran right by him. And they both told the same story, and neither one of them knew that the other one had told me about it.
Wow.
So it's always good when you can get like two people that have identical stories,
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I was say, yeah, those are the best when you really say, okay, there is something out there, like short of seeing one yourself. It's like when you can get two or three witnesses, and I've interviewed like that, you're like, okay, there is no other way to explain this.
Oh, yeah. Got one here from George out in New Mexico. Lyle, do you believe in the Mokele and Bimbe? And I probably didn't pronounce that right. And what are your thoughts on the thylacine? Or is the thylacine still alive?
Mokele Mbembe, I love that because, when I was a kid, I was all in on dinosaurs. So to even imagine that there is a sauropod type dinosaur living in the Congo, is fascinating. Um, you know, I, I think it's possible. And that's an area where you can't do a lot of research because the Republic of Congo government is a big problem. So there has been researchers out there, and I think there's some intriguing evidence to suggest that there is a unique animal living out there. So I think it's possible. The longer it goes, of course, the more it's kind of like Loch Ness. You're like, you think that by now something would come of it, but not to say it's not out there. Thylacine is another one. I think there is a possibility that some of the population of those Tasmanian tigers has managed to escape extinction and is living out there. Every once in a while there's some decent photos or other things to suggest. But I think again, it's like I think we hope it does because after man eradicated that amazing creature, you would just hope that there was, redemption there if we did find a small population and we could bring them back to, to being prolific, then that would be great. So I think there's a chance, and I definitely hold out.
I agree with you completely on the thylacine. I think that there probably is a remnant population, and it seems like Australia has a lot of sightings of it.
Yeah.
And there's one video that I think is really compelling. But they said it was a fox. It was a fox with a wounded leg. And I don't know about foxes in Australia, but I know what foxes look like around here, and that didn't look anything like a fox to me.
Yeah, I think I know what one you're talking about. It's unfortunately they're just not quite crisp enough to tell, but it doesn't look like anything but a thylacine. But who knows? Hopefully we can get a better video. I mean, if somebody just gets one good video, boom, there it is.
And I'm going to, on the Mokele Mbembe, and I hope I'm saying that right.
You are. That's really good.
Because my Swahili is not as good as it used to be, let's say.
Right.
But I think there is a real good population, a real good possibility that there could be a population there. You have natives that talk about it, and they've taken books because, that's the thing. There's always going to be a language barrier.
Yeah.
But they've taken books with pictures and they say, oh, well, is it this? And, they've shown different things, whales and manatees and everything else like that. And there's a picture of like a bronchiosaur, and they say, yeah, that's it. So I think that's a pretty good indication. Unknown Cryptid says, Lyle, have you had any encounters with bears or mountain lions?
Yes. My family has a cabin home in northern New Mexico in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, and I have come up on bears in the wild a number of times out there. But it's always, here I am, I live to tell about it. So it was never anything dangerous, but when you're in the presence of something like that, can take you out, it's a little sobering. Mountain lions, I've seen tracks, but I've never actually seen one in the wild. I've seen warnings posted up there in some of those forest areas where hikers have gone. I've seen bobcat, of course. I've never seen one, but I'm quite certain I've been close enough to them. You just don't see them all the time.
And it's funny. I live in Virginia. I live right on the border between Kentucky and Virginia. So I'm out on the very far southwestern end of Virginia. And mountain lions are not supposed to exist in the state of Virginia, but I've seen 3 in the county that I live in. 2 were the tan color, and believe it or not, 1 was black. And I can't mistake what I saw. It was not a house cat. It was not a big bobcat. They had huge tails. Even the black one had a long tail. It was probably 3 feet long or longer. And they all were curled kind of like that on the end. And, they say they don't exist here, and that, I even had a biologist go as far as tell me one time that they can't be black. Black's not in their color pattern. And I got to thinking about that, and I was like, if you have a remnant population and you have, rampant inbreeding, you're not going to be able to control color or anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, other species of wildcats have melanistic versions, jaguars, leopards. There's no way they can definitively say that a cougar / mountain lion / puma could not, because now just because they haven't found one doesn't mean it can't happen. But as soon as you get into Bigfoot research, you're immediately privy to all those Black Panther sightings. As you know, it's like I know numerous people. I got a game camera photo the other day from a guy who had been in South Texas making a delivery, and he randomly talked to this guy who showed him a picture. Now, this was a black wildcat, and I looked at the photo. He's like, dude, it's a Black Panther, but I could see the actual spots on it. So it was actually a melanistic jaguar. But this guy, this was on the guy's property. Like this was on his back, in his back area of his property. So he has a jaguar running around out there. It was scary enough, but yeah, it was pretty cool.
Texas has had a big influx of jaguars and jaguarundis, I believe is the other name of it. It's another cat from down south that's moved up into Texas.
Right. I have actually seen a jaguarundi. Those are smaller, much smaller cats. I saw one of those. That was way back. It was probably like 2007. A little bit in East Texas, a little bit out of its zone, but I didn't really know what it was when I first saw it, and I had to kind of do some research to realize, wow, that's what it was, because I was like, what kind of thing was that? But it was cool to see it.
And that is a really odd looking feline too. Some people call it an otter-faced cat. My own interpretation of it would be it kind of looks like it may have some type of Down syndrome or something. It's a really strange looking animal in the face.
Yeah, they're odd, and yeah, that's why it threw me off. It was he's kind of down on the shore of this kind of lake in the piney woods, and it was making this weird howling noise. And I was in my tent, and it just kept going. I thought at first, was that a bird or what? Like some weird cat? So I finally just got up. I'm like, okay, this thing's got to shut up. So I walked down there, put the light, and then it was just standing there. And then it just took off, turned and ran. And I was like, what kind of thing was that? And so, yeah, I knew what a jaguarundi was, but I didn't have a mental image of it to compare. But I just looked it up, and it was weird.
Yeah, they're definitely odd looking. George has one last question. He says, one last question. Are there other cryptids in Falk besides the Bigfoot?
The only kind of other reports I've gotten are the Black Panther reports. One of those came from one of the Miller County police officers. That was some years ago. And I probably had 6 or 8 other guys tell me they've seen Black Panthers. So those are there. That's it. I mean, I haven't come across any other sightings, no dog man sightings or lizard man or any other weird stuff. Just mainly the Falk monster and Black Panthers.
Okay, well, I don't have any more questions, Lyle, and we're going to go ahead and end it right here. If you don't care, could you hang on for a little bit if it's not too late for you, and we'll talk a little bit after the show if that's fine.
Sure.
Well, guys, I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight. We had a great show. We've had a great guest. A lot of knowledge here this evening. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And as always, we'll see you guys again next Monday. Good night, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Sasquatch Watch Radio. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Stay connected. Don't miss our next exciting show, airing next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. To stay updated, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd also love for you to join our Facebook page at facebook.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio and check out our website at squatchradio.com. Share your stories and feedback. Your feedback means the world to us, so please give us a thumbs up on our shows and let us know what you think. Have you had an encounter? If you've had a sighting or encounter, we want to hear from you. Reach out to us through our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. And if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next Monday night.